There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by Kohberger.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, I stay away for a couple of days and all kinds of things happen, you know. New announcements, of course, in the Gilgo case. After 27 years, they've made the identification of another young woman who was found in that area, and also happened to be an escort. And her name is Karen Vergara. And it's been 27 years since, and I'm sure this is a bad picture of her. It happens to be the only picture that they put out there. There was one that equally, she was 30, I believe she was 34 when she went missing. She's obviously not 34 in this picture. So they determined the identification on this woman, Karen Vergara. She was found both on Fire Island in missing in 1996, and also near Jones Beach in 2011. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney announced on Friday that the woman who investigators have been calling Jane Doe number 7 and Fire Island Jane Doe was Karen Vergara, who was 36 years old and is believed to have been working as an escort when she went missing in 1996. To join me tonight, you guys are going to be very happy. I have two outstanding, I don't even call them guests, I'll call them co-hosts. And one of them is, of course, a fan favorite, the man of reason, retired NYPD Sergeant, Professor Michael Geary. Mike, welcome to the show tonight.
Billy, good evening. Thank you for having me on.
It's always great to have you, Mike. You know, the folks, the subscribers, the fans, they love you. And it's good. So maybe I'll get some love too. But we also have with us tonight, fantastic, and she's with her own show, Melanie Little, attorney, mother of 5, actress. She's doing fantastic. She hasn't even been on the air, I don't think, for 2 months. She's already got 4,500 subscribers. She's well loved, and I'm privileged to have her on the show, and she's also a fan favorite. Melanie, welcome to the show tonight.
Hi, Bill. Hi, Mike. If he's the voice of reason, what does that make me? Am I the voice of conflict?
Reasonableness.
The voice of reason, I'm the voice
I'll make the word bigger. You know, Melanie, I watched a little bit of your show last night, and it was interesting that you put so many folks that were in the chat came on the show. And as I said to you, that can be risky, but it seemed like it worked out for you very well. And I'm sure the folks that got to be on the show as on the spot invited, they were probably thrilled with it. But let's get to this. Mm-hmm. Now, what we had said with this case is that Rex Heuermann, again, innocent to proven guilty, we'll always say that, right? But right now he's sitting in Suffolk County Jail. And the Suffolk County DA, Ray Tierney, and the Suffolk County Police, the FBI, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, and of course, the DA's office investigators, they all feel like they have a very, very strong case against him. So let's put it this way. He's not going anywhere. But one of the big things that we want everyone to know is that this case is not over with. And Melanie, I think you proved that last night by throwing it out there and have people come on your show, and they were telling you, I had some contact with Rex Heuermann, and some of them told you their stories, which to me was fascinating. And that type of investigation has to be ongoing. Melanie, what your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I had, and this was all unplanned. These were people, I had put it in the comments of when I started promoting the live that, hey, I'm going to do a town hall if anybody wants to, because, you know, you need to get people notice, right? To get camera ready. Like if people are in their pajamas with their hair in a bun on top of their head, they're not going to want to come on. So I put it out there ahead of time. And so the people that I called in were totally unplanned. And I had one young lady called in who was a blackjack dealer at a casino in Connecticut, Mohegan Sun. And she told me she was at a high stakes blackjack table dealing 20 years ago. And he sat there for 8 hours and she dealt to him and he taunted her for 8 hours straight, and she never forgot it. The story was fascinating. I think we talked for at least 40 minutes. The whole show was 2.5 hours because we just kept talking, and so many interesting people came on, and she never forgot it. I mean, the same thing that I said about seeing him in the courtroom, that evil emanating from him, that chill. She had the same thing to say, and it was fascinating.
You know, Melanie, one of the things I said, and of course I've worked large investigations like this. I never worked a serial killer case, actually. We had one, and I had just gotten to the 2-3 squad, and it was a guy named Aaron Key, but I didn't get to work on that case. They had been putting the case together. Anyway, one of the things that you have to know about a large investigation like this is that, especially with the search warrant they did on Rex Heuermann's house, they've taken things out of there that potentially someone can identify, someone being maybe relatives of someone who's missing, perhaps Karen Vergara. And right now, the Suffolk County DA Ray Tiers, he's saying so far this is not connected to Rex Heuermann. He can't say that because he has no evidence that it is. But the commonality, I always talk about the commonality and things that make things patternable. Right away, what jumps out at us, it's somewhat in the same vicinity, right? Although this one, part of her was found in Nassau County because it was near Jones Beach, and the other part in Fire Island. But the commonality, the one thing that we always jumps out at us, and some people were upset, we were talking, she was an escort. That is important. That is extremely important. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, that's the biggest commonality among all the girls' bodies that have been recovered already. However, the dismemberment is different. And I think we talked about this with Bobby Chacon, and he said, yeah, serial killers are known to evolve. They start out one way, and then they change their MO for whatever reason. But once they get an MO that they could trust, they like, they're in control of, they'll stick with it. But it is possible she could be maybe one of the first, in chronological order, maybe one of the first girls that he may have killed if indeed he is responsible and has done this. But because of the dismemberment aspect of it, they may think at this point it may be someone else. It's not Joel Rifkin because he was already in prison by the time that she was reported missing. But it is possible he may have changed his MO, and maybe he actually is part of this. But you know, given the time and nature and the elements and the body being outside and dismembered, it's going to be really difficult to pin this on him. And I think we've talked about this before. We may not know ever the true number of girls that he may have killed. We just don't know. They're going to do their best, but there's no guaranteeing that he is part of this. So right now, Ray Tierney is right, saying, you know, we're not sure, we don't know, we really can't be sure. People shouldn't get their hopes up that every time they find some girl who's been missing that it's Heuermann's. So
you know, Mike, one of the things we had mentioned, and I mean, I sometimes watch other podcasts, believe it or not. I'll take a peek. I don't watch them for that long, but I'll take a peek. We had Dr. Joni Johnston on, and we said to her, Dr. Johnston, who was a forensic psychologist, a brilliant, serial killer expert. What are the chances that he just started doing this at the age of, well, he would have been 46 during, 2011, 2010 when this happened. Now this puts him at 42. But do you think he started at 42, or did he start when he was in his 20s or 30s? Melanie.
Yeah, the chances are slim and none, and I think Slim just got on the bus. So, most people who are experts, that was a good one, right? I didn't even get a chuckle out of Mike. Not even a chuckle.
I love your theatricality.
Nobody knew that was a joke. Okay, joke. If you have to tell them it's a joke, it's not funny.
I did.
So the experts that I was listening to, profilers and such, say that most of these serial killers start maybe in their 20s. Like that's when they do what they call their like practice kills to see what they can get away with. And so what's interesting is that Karen went missing on Valentine's Day in 1996 when Rex would have been 32. Her legs were found about 2 months after she went missing in a black garbage bag floating near Fire Island. And then it wasn't until 15 years later, after the Gilgo 4 were found in 2011, when her skull was found. And her skull was found the same day that they found, remember, remains of like 3 or 4 other victims. So, you know, my spidey sense is telling me that I don't even think she was his first. You know, maybe he was dismembering and then it got to be too much work. And then he said, they're not finding these parts anyway. Maybe I don't need to dismember. And then after the Gilgo 4 were found, he found a different dumping ground. I don't know. We don't know. But it's curious that they're releasing the identity of Karen Vergara now when they had her identity back in October of 22.
Well, I think that was just
thought.
part of the police keeping things close to the vest and just not releasing things because they were sort of baffled by it too. This didn't match the MO. It didn't match the signature. So they wanted to keep it close to the vest. I don't find that unusual. There's a lot of unusual things about this case. I want to play a little bit of this from Law and Crime.
26 years after a woman from Manhattan vanished on Valentine's Day, genetic genealogy helps identify her.
I'm here with our fellow task force members to announce the identity of what has formerly been known as Fire Island Jane Doe.
The Fire Island Jane Doe is Karen Vergara, but questions remain as to whether Vergara's death is related to the murders of 4 other women, known as the Gilgo 4. Thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime. I'm Anjanette Levy. For years, all law enforcement had to go on was a sketch, but now with the help of genetic genealogy, the Fire Island Jane Doe has a name.
We were able to identify Fire Island Jane Doe as Karen Vergara, who was 34 years old.
Karen Vergara disappeared on Valentine's Day in 1996. More than 2 months later, in April, legs and feet were found on Fire Island. Atreon Labs, which assisted with the case, says the remains were in a garbage bag, and the toes had red nail polish from a recent pedicure. 15 years later, the woman's skull was found along Ocean Parkway on Nassau County's Tobay Beach.
That skull was found following the discovery of the remains of Jessica Taylor, and the skull was found on the same day as the remains of what is commonly come to be referred to as Peaches was found on Jones Beach. Thereafter, in July of 2011, the Suffolk County Crime Lab linked the 2 sets of remains via DNA analysis. And by that, I mean the legs that were found in the vicinity of Davis Park Street in Manhattan and was believed to be working as an escort at the time of her disappearance. There was no missing persons complaint filed.
Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney went on to explain how Vergara was ultimately identified.
In August of 2022, approximately 6 months after we formed this Gilgo task force, a DNA profile suitable for genealogical comparison was developed from the remains of Karen Vergara. In September of 2022, the FBI was able via a genetic genealogy review to identify Ms. Vergara presumptively as Fire Island Jane Doe. Thereafter, in October of 2022, using a buccal swab from a relative of Karen Vergara, we were able to definitively identify her.
Fire Island and Tobay Beach aren't far apart, and both are close to Gilgo Beach, where a line of remains were found in 2010 and 2011. All of the locations are about 20 minutes away from Massapequa Park. Rex Heuermann lived in Massapequa Park before his arrest last month for the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He is also the prime suspect in the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Heuermann has pleaded not guilty, and his lawyer said this week he maintains his innocence.
We're not going to try the case in the press. I doubt that any one of you for a moment have even contemplated the possibility that they have the wrong guy. There's no plea deal. He said from the moment I met him that I did not do this. So we're prepared to go forward. We will defend this case in a court of law, and we will go to trial in this case.
Surprisingly, the DA did not take questions about Karen Vergara or whether he believes Vergara's death is connected to the Gilgo 4.
It's important to note that there are no charges at this time. Miss Vergara's disappearance was in 1996, which is 27 years ago. We are going to continue to work this particular case as we did the Gilgo 4 investigation. We're going to have no comment on what, if any, suspects we developed at this time. This is a confidential investigation, so I'm not going to be taking any questions.
That statement raises the question about whether the task force believes someone else is responsible for Karen Vergara's death. Vergara was dismembered. Her torso and hands were never located, and the remains were found in 2 locations. It should be noted, vehicles are only allowed on certain parts of Fire Island, such as the lighthouse, but civilians cannot drive the length of the island. Ferries provide transportation back and forth to Fire Island. Meanwhile, Rex Heuermann remains in the Suffolk County Jail, where he's being held without bail. He will be back in court next month.
So very interesting. I think everyone wants to believe that Rex Heuermann did every single one of these. The horrific thought that it could be a second serial killer or someone else is involved, maybe as his partner, that is terrifying to most people. That, wait a minute, we caught this guy. What do you mean? How do they know? And that's why I think the police are being so careful with linking cases together, because they've had an egg on their face before with this investigation. So they want to make sure that they're correct. So you noticed Ray Tierney, District Attorney Tierney, didn't take any questions after that. And oh, by the way, Melanie, the reason I became a cop was because I'm not very good in math. I said he was 42. You're right. He was 32. It was 27 years ago, and he's 59. So you're right. He's 32. So that's a little younger to have started this. The other thing is Rex Heuermann worked at Jones Beach when he was a teenager. So he knew this terrain pretty damn well. But the thing about Fire Island, you just heard, you can't drive a vehicle the whole length of Fire Island. So does that exclude him from bringing his vehicle on and, say, potentially dumping a body on Fire Island?
Well, it's just the legs that floated up onto the beach. They were in a garbage bag. He could have thrown them out, right on the other side of the side of the bay, on the other side of the water, and they floated over. That was my thinking. I don't think he dumped it over there.
No, I don't think so either. I was thinking the same thing. But then there's people that think he took a boat across the bay and did, which I think is pretty far-fetched that happened. But anyway, yeah, so people want to know that it's one person, but right now they cannot connect these things. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, the Tierney's being extra careful, keeping everything close to the vest, because the moment he says something that is equivocal, people are going to be jumping all over it. The conspiracy theorists are going to be jumping all over it, making all kinds of videos, getting people into like a little bit of a panic. We saw that with the Kohberger case. It's not satisfying for the press because he doesn't want to take questions, but I think it's the best thing to do right now. He is not making any promises or any sort of direction that they're looking in. He definitely did not want to do that. He told them he's not going to do that sort of thing. It's the best thing for this case right now because it's too early, and it may be he doesn't want to get their hopes up too. And because of the fact that, they found her skull one place, they found the legs in another place. There's the torso has never been found, and maybe never will be found. And just playing it close to the vest, I think it's not satisfying. And maybe the public isn't satisfied, but it's the best course of action at this point in the investigation.
I wanted to bring up, they mentioned Othram Labs. Does that ring a bell, guys? The same lab was used to identify the DNA in the Brian Kohberger, the Idaho case. The same exact lab that the FBI does the genetic genealogy, but then they send it to a certain lab. And I think Othram is in Texas, if I remember correctly. So they're making one hell of a name for themselves as the go-to lab in these investigative genetic genealogy cases. There was another and this came out when I forget the lady's name. She had a law degree and she was the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, and she was a former FBI agent. But this piece of evidence was revealed when she was the PC. So that belt, she was wrapped in that belt, and they think that potentially could have been someone it could be upside down, William Heuermann, and it's someone in Rex Heuermann's family. I don't know or if they ever revealed whether they were able to swab it and get DNA, but this is what I'm talking about. Someone could recognize a belt like this, and it could be a huge piece of evidence, and maybe someone come forward if you put this on television or the broadcast media, or even before they actually pull the trigger on in regards to charges. But it seems like they potentially have a pretty strong case, or else I don't think they would have mentioned it. However, they have not yet announced that they were ready to add that to the indictment. Melanie?
Not yet, but they have announced that there is a grand jury ongoing. So it seems like the grand jury is hearing the case now. I mean, there's been a lot of slips, so that's what it seems like to me. So it seems like an indictment could be coming down the pike at any time. You know, the problem was that she was the first to go missing in 2007, and apparently they never pulled the cell phone data back then. So it was harder to retrieve. The retention policies, the carriers didn't hold on to it for that long. So they're having to connect more dots, and it's taking longer, but I think it's coming.
Absolutely. And Mike, I want to ask you, now these cases, they're 4 distinct individual cases. They will try them separately, wouldn't they?
Billy, I don't think they're going to try them separately. I think they're going to try them all at once. Just like take a look at the Kohberger case. It's going to be one trial, and it's going to be a long trial, and it's going to have 4 sets of, 4 victims, and it's going to be, all the data is going to be presented to the jury. It's going to be a long process. They're going to, because the jury has to connect cell phone data to one victim, DNA evidence to one victim if they've got it. Then they got to look at the second victim, third victim, fourth victim. I don't know, Melanie, I don't think they would do 4 trials or 3 trials right now. I think they would do 1, right?
Well, they need to do 1 to get to first degree murder.
Yeah.
Because it's serial killing, right?
2,
So,
yeah.
So without multiple homicides or murder, you can't get to first degree murder. It has to, unless it's a police officer or a judge or a fireman. I mean, the New York law has very strict, rules for first degree. So that's how they're going to get to first degree, in my opinion.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be risky in the fact that if you lost the one with 4 people involved, you lost the whole thing? Whereas if you could do it individually, you'd get 4 shots at the apple, so to speak.
But I think they're gonna. The jury is gonna on the verdict sheet. There's going to be: do you find him guilty of the murder of Megan Waterman? Yes or no?
Right.
So they can decide yes or no for each victim.
Okay.
Yeah, and
right. And then if they find he killed 2 or more, they can get first degree. If they only find 1, second degree, and so forth.
And Billy, remember, there's going to be a lot of overlapping information presented by all of the anybody with DNA, anybody talking about the cell phone data. There will be some overlaps in terms of identical information being given to the jury. It would be 4 trials with essentially, it's not like the Kohberger case where it's essentially all the same evidence, but this is going to be, a lot of it is going to be very, very similar. You'd run into, double jeopardy, type of thing. And it would take, you're talking about a one trial, then another trial, and then another trial, and then another trial. You're talking, several, 2 years worth of trials. So one trial's got to be it.
And then they can have all the same experts. They'll have 1 DNA expert instead of 4. They'll have 1 cell phone. They'll call in 1, expert from the carrier to authenticate all the records if it's all the same carrier for the burner phones, et cetera. Right. So it's going to conserve the resources a bit.
One of the things that's very interesting, and as much as we talk about DNA, and it's very complex, and not just in the science of DNA, but the legal application of DNA is very difficult. And Mike, and I asked you this over the air, so I'm not going to pretend I'm smarter than you. But what I asked you was, we all know about the pizza DNA, all right? So they watched him throw out a box of pizza, and inside of it was pizza crust. They retrieved it out of the garbage, which they don't need a search warrant to, because once you throw something away, you have no expectation of privacy, and it belongs to the garbage man, right? Or the world, whoever wants that box. Anyway, they swab the crust, and they find out the DNA belongs to Rex Heuermann. Now, from what I always understood, I thought that, oh, okay, that's an exemplar. Now that can be used over and over again. However, I'm wrong. Explain it, Mike, to me and to our audience.
Well, I'm not a DNA expert. That's a disclaimer up front. But remember,
You want to give your law degree back, Mike?
no, I worked too hard for that. But I just want to, just want to look. If you look at one of the girls' bodies that was recovered, one of the Gilgo 4, on their body, there was tape, like duct tape, and there was hair in it. And one of the hairs belonged, they realize now, to Rex Heuermann's wife. And they've got that sample. They got the sample from bottles left outside, I guess, recycling bottles on Long Island. So they realized that one female's hair and saliva on a bottle matched Rex Heuermann's wife. Now they've got also a dark hair on another one of the girls, and they've got that DNA, and then they've got the DNA from the pizza crust, and it's a match. And they believe that pizza crust was last touched, eaten, licked by Rex Heuermann. But in order to go to court, and district attorneys and maybe all attorneys are a little bit anally retentive. We talked about this before. They want to nail down every single possible avenue of excuse or alibi that a defendant can get to, and a defense attorney can make some sort of reasonable doubt from. So they want an exemplar taken, a cheek swab, like they did. Remember what they did with the Kohberger case, and they want to nail that down, because if you don't, then it leads the possibility for the defense to say, well, you didn't actually see Brian Kohberger eat that pizza.
You mean
pizza,
Rex Heuermann?
Rex Heuermann, sorry. Rex Heuermann eat that pizza. Thank you.
Mixing up cases.
Oh, yeah. Because I've been doing this stuff all day. So Rex Heuermann, it could be that he had someone else touch that, and that someone else, that unknown third party, may actually be the killer. You just have to put a little bit of reasonable doubt into one juror's mind. That's it. So I think, like with the Kohberger case, when they did the DNA swab at the house in Pennsylvania, you want to do that to nail it down so that there's no possible way that you're going to, you don't want to give him any wiggle room. And that's how I see it.
Absolutely. Melanie, I just want to ask you, how easy will it be for the prosecution to get a judge to write up a search warrant to get a exemplar of a buccal swab of Rex Heuermann to get his DNA?
Well, the prosecution has made a motion to compel the defendant to produce a buccal swab DNA, which is a cheek swab. And it's not automatically done. I saw somebody in the chat said, isn't that automatically done upon arrest? And no, it's not. They're fingerprinted, but there's no DNA sample taken. So there has to be a motion made in court. So the prosecution has made this motion. It's a 3-pronged test about whether or not the judge is going to decide that, yes, he should have to give a buccal swab DNA. The first is that there's probable cause to believe that the defendant committed the crimes, which we have because he was indicted by a grand jury. So you can check that box. The second prong is that there's a clear indication that relevant material will be found if he's compelled to give a DNA sample. And they can, the argument for that is, well, we already have the DNA from the pizza crust and we already have the DNA from the hair. So yes, it's going to produce some relevant and material information. And by the way, Judge, it could also be exculpatory, because if we get this buccal swab and it doesn't match, then he's not the guy. So you have to kind of grant the motion. The third prong of the motion is that the method used is to secure the sample is reliable and safe. And we know that. I mean, these cheek swabs have been used for a very long time. So I think the judge is going to grant it. But then I think the defendant will cross move for a protective order saying, okay, you can have the swab, the cheek swab, but you cannot upload this DNA into any of the state, local, or national databases until a conviction, because that is the law in New York. We can't put the DNA into CODIS until there's a conviction in New York. Every state is different. A lot of states will allow you to upload DNA into CODIS upon arrest. New York is not like that.
Melanie, I'm so glad that you guys settled that, because so many folks are confused about that, including me, because the laws have changed over the years.
Yes.
When we used to make an arrest when I was on the job, we would ask for a voluntary buccal swab. And you would never, of course, do it in a case like this because they would be, he was compelled. What do you mean? 3 cops were there with a Q-tip and they were like, give us a swab, But in a case like this, you would definitely want to do it via a search warrant. However, day to day, when we arrested someone, we would ask, would you volunteer to give a buccal swab? A lot of times they'd say, sure,
Well, 2012 is when it changed. So, the cases you might be thinking about were prior to that. And I think it was commonly done. I think you're right. It was routine.
Yes. Mike, any other thoughts on this?
No, but I think it's Melanie's right. The protective order is necessary because technically there hasn't been any finding of guilt by a jury, no conviction, and I think that's the judge. I agree 100%. The judge is probably going to, especially because it could be exculpatory evidence favorable to Heuermann, and so I think the protective order is the best way to go. Do it, protective order, and then. Just wait and see what happens. And if it comes back that it's a match for Heuermann, terrific. If it's not a match, then that little victory goes to the defense. But that's
Absolutely.
The way it goes. That's the way it goes.
Folks, just to give a little more, I'll put on my professor hat for 1 second. The CODIS database is run by the FBI. And there's 2 categories of DNA in that. And one is offender DNA. As Melanie just described, that can only be obtained in New York State after a conviction. And the other type of DNA is called forensic DNA. And that's DNA, unidentified DNA from crime scenes. But not every crime scene is sent to the CODIS database because it costs a fortune. So many crime scenes could be for a rape, could be for a murder. They're not tested unless they have a suspect. Sad, right, guys?
Yeah.
Defund the police, as they say. That's the reality of this. Not every, again, 2 types of DNA or 2 categories, offender and forensic. And forensic is unidentified perpetrated DNA from crime scenes. And again, not routinely tested. Guys, I'm going to go to a quick commercial. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you want to join us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up and ring that bell. If you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. You see the folks in the green font. They're all part of our YouTube fans, our friends, our subscribers. And we really appreciate them. They've built this Police Off the Cuff YouTube channel from the ground up. And I appreciate all you guys. So, guys, this case, again, is fascinating. And as 2 or 3 years ago, I believe I had Barbara Butcher on. And she had said, this case is amazingly complex. And I remember that Barbara Butcher said that it's very complex. And it doesn't get any less complex because someone's been arrested. Now it's still, how do we give closure to the family members of these other cases? And that's why, as we said early on in this show, that this investigation is nowhere close to being over with. Melanie.
Yeah, technology has advanced so much too. So I think that maybe we're going to see some breakthroughs. What's also interesting, since we were talking about DNA, is that familial DNA has often been used to identify suspects, but with Karen Vergara, it was one of the first times it was used to identify a victim. Absolutely. So now we're going to see other breakthroughs. Her family had, although they said they didn't file a missing persons report for her, they did hire a private investigator who had DNA swabs from the family, and I think that's how they got them. And so this is a breakthrough also with identifying victims. So I think this is we're going to see a lot of interesting things happen in this case.
Melanie, we have spoken about it, and we're all, I think, rookies in regards to investigative genetic genealogy. It's also a very complex science, and some of the pioneers in that, of course, C.C. Moore is probably one of the best in the country, and she can explain it so the layman like us can understand it. But it's still, even understanding it, investigative genetic genealogy, according to C.C. Moore, right out of her mouth, should only be used as a lead for a case, never as probable cause. Pretty damn interesting, right? Never, right out of her mouth, never for probable cause. So then if the police do get a lead from investigative genealogy, they have to develop the probable cause through that lead. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, you got to have more than just the DNA results. Remember, DNA evidence is circumstantial evidence. As convincing as it is, it's still not direct evidence. It is circumstantial evidence. And we know, like in New York State, and I imagine, sure, it's in all other states, you know, you can't, just like you cannot be convicted upon testimony alone. There has to be some other evidence presented before you can have a conviction. Same thing with this. It's a good thing. I think CC Moore's right. It's a very good thing. It should always be considered, you know, a lead. It can be considered a lead that moves you from point A to point B. That's excellent. But by itself, it should never be the basis of an arrest. It should be, you know, other things. And on top of that, like you could just consider it like the cherry on top of the sundae. That always helps a lot, but you have to have the corpus of evidence in order to show a judge that you've got probable cause. And DNA alone should never be considered probable cause.
Very well said, Mike. Ann Bozzarelli, I hope I said your name correctly. Rex Heuermann should not want to give a swab. If he is innocent, you would support that. Refuse, I think you know it, will nail you. Well, and if they get a search warrant, he has no right to refuse. They will tie him down and take his blood if need be, if they get a search warrant. Yes, he can refuse minus a search warrant. But if they do get a search warrant, he has that's an order to compel from a judge. Melanie?
Yeah, and that's similar to, you know, if you're pulled over for drunk driving and, you know, you're in the hospital, they can't just take your blood and test it for, they have to get a court order. So, yeah, he can't refuse. If the judge grants the motion, then he's going to have to do it.
Absolutely. This is the attorney for Rex Heuermann's wife, Essa Ellerup is her name. And there's been a lot of talk about the family and did they know, did they not know? And it's sort of generally accepted, at least from the Suffolk County Police, the police commissioner, Rodney Harrison. He said right early on that he doesn't believe the family knew anything about this. Let me play a little bit of Essa Ellerup's attorney.
You know, as you can imagine, even if any percentage of the allegations that have been in the media are true, it's been an irreparable breakdown of the marriage.
The lawyer for the wife of suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann talks about what her life has been like since his arrest and why she filed for divorce. I'm Anjanette Levy. Welcome to Law and Crime's Sidebar Podcast. Asa Ellerup's life was turned upside down nearly 3 weeks ago when her husband, Rex Heuermann, was taken into custody for the murders of 3 women whose remains were found on Long Island's Gilgo Beach many years ago. Heuermann has pleaded not guilty to the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello. Their bodies were found wrapped in camouflage burlap along Oceanside Parkway in 2010. The DA says Heuermann's DNA was found in the burlap along with the DNA of his wife. Heuermann is also the prime suspect in the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. 8 sets of remains were found on Gilgo Beach in 2010 and 2011, including an Asian male and a toddler. The others were women. Ellerup, her daughter, and son went back to their home in Massapequa Park last week after police searched it for more than a week. Her attorney shared photos with us from inside the home. It shows what it looks like following the search, and frankly, it's a complete mess.
You know, Mike, I wanted to just comment upon that because I don't know if folks know, but the police never clean up after a search warrant. No matter where the search warrant is affected, they're not going to send the merry maids there after they leave. It's just not happening, you know. And I know that everyone's making a big deal out of this. They probably damaged a lot of their home too. And you know, you could talk about, Mike, what recourse does the family have against the police department that destroyed their tub, probably knocked through walls, destroyed locks, and basically destroyed the home in searching for potential DNA, body parts, or evidence of murders in their home. Would you comment upon that?
Yeah, Billy, what you're looking for in the search warrant dictates the amount of destruction that there's going to be in a home. If you're looking for stolen auto parts, like an engine or a transmission, you're not going to be destroying a bedroom. You're going to be looking in the garage or the basement or something like that. So there's going to be very little destruction to the property, to the house proper. But if you're looking for evidence of a homicide, you're looking for blood evidence, DNA evidence, you're going to be ripping up the carpet. You might even think there may be a victim buried there. So you're going to be digging up the backyard like they did. So there's going to be a total destruction, because what you're looking for can be secreted behind a wall, under a floor, outside, in a shed. I think they even went through the shed and ripped that apart. They were looking for blood evidence, probably DNA evidence, in the drain in the bathroom. So they ripped up the floorboards and the bathtub and things like that, because that's how you could dispose of a body in a bathtub, chop it up and bag it, things like that. And so the place got destroyed. Now, for her recourse, she's going to file the notice of claim with Suffolk County and the Suffolk County Police Department, and then she'll file her. She'll have to get an attorney, do this. She'll have to get a list of what's been damaged, maybe cost estimates to fix it, send it to them. I did this work a little bit when I was in New York City in the legal bureau in headquarters for a couple of years, and used to get all kinds of notices of claim about police radio cars. The RMP drove over somebody's curb and smashed their roses, so they sued the city for like $300. Oh yeah, we used to get these things all the time. So it's going to be really bad, but there's really no duty for the police to clean up and make everything back to the way it was. Sad, but that's just the way it is. She's just going to have to file notice of claim and settle on some amount. And that's going to take a while. Unfortunately, that's going to take a while.
Melanie, I could see you're Jane Q. Citizen, and you're a little more enraged at this than Mike and I are about cleaning up. In fact, I could see you nodding when I mentioned the marinades.
I kind of feel like it should be covered by homeowners insurance. I feel like it should be, and then the carrier should go subrogate against the county, because look, if let's face it, if she's got to file a notice of claim, you have 90 days to file a notice of claim. But that could take forever for her to get any sort of payment on that. And that's, look, homeowners should cover it. She was not responsible for this, allegedly, it was the husband. So I think depending on who the carrier is, they may cover it. I know there was a GoFundMe set up for her, and there was a lot of money donated by people. I mean, I heard her couch was shredded. She had the mattresses were taken away. I mean, she had nowhere to sleep. She had nowhere to sit. And yeah, you're right. They don't have a duty to clean up. It's not like they're going to toss your clothes out of your dresser and fold them and put them back. But this is, I think, I don't think anybody ever realized, the extent of this is like kind of shining a light on that, right? So I hope it's covered by insurance for their sake, so at least they can get some money pretty soon to try and put that house back together. But based on what the police said about when they first went in the house, I think a lot of that clutter, as Tierney called it, may have been there already. So I don't really know. I mean, I'm sure the tile wasn't ripped up, but I mean, as far as all those boxes and all the stuff in there, we don't know the condition before either.
They probably photographed it before they hit the warrant.
Maybe.
And
yeah.
That would be a smart thing to do. So we could say, we just improved this place. I remember I one time hit a warrant, and they made a civilian complaint that we wrecked their house. And I said, they had roaches the size of cats in that house. And they were like, if anything, our warrant improved the way the house looked. It was like horrendous looking. Let me play a little bit more of this from Law and Crime.
Ellerup filed for divorce following her husband's arrest, but that doesn't mean she's not in contact with him. Here's Heuermann's attorney, Michael Brown, outside of the courthouse this week.
He's had contact with his wife, yes, and family members. I don't think she's visited yet, obviously, because she doesn't want to be ambushed by the press. So she hasn't visited him at the jail yet, no.
Brown also spoke about what Heuermann has told him about the murders and his arrest.
What has my client told me? He told me he didn't do this. This district attorney's office has a whole office. They're the biggest law firm in this county. I'm one guy, right? So Ms. Koish is going to be co-counsel on this. We have other attorneys that I expect are going to be assisting on this. And just to pour through the discovery is an enormous task. There's no plea deal. He said from the moment I met him that I did not do this. So we're prepared to go forward. We will defend this case in a court of law, and we will go to trial in this case.
But the district attorney has said that they are confident that Heuermann is their man.
This is a 13-year case. So as you saw, we have a great deal of information, evidence, photographs, reports to provide to the defense counsel. We've begun that process. I think it was 8 gigabytes of material, which is a tremendous amount. And that's just the beginning. We're going to continue to do that on a rolling basis. And, this case, the charges in the indictment are just allegations. So this is the first step in the process of proving those allegations. So we look forward to undertaking that process.
Meanwhile, media and true crime enthusiasts have swarmed the neighborhood in Massapequa Park, where Heuermann lives, out of curiosity. Law and crime producer Alyssa Fisher approached Ellerup to see if there was anything she'd like to say.
She looked exhausted, to say the least. Just bloodshot. Her lips were pale. She looked like she, I'm sure, had maybe just woken up from a nap. She was in loungewear. She just looked sad as she said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm not interested in speaking right now." And completely understandable. She's had a really difficult few weeks.
Joining me to discuss the impact that the arrest of Rex.
I don't think we need to discuss with her. My thoughts are, and look, I don't doubt that the family didn't know about his serial killing escapades, but I really believe that they were abused by this guy. I don't think Rex Heuermann is a nice guy in his day-to-day life. And I think his family probably have what's called Stockholm syndrome. And they're just used to this, living with this savage, and they take his abuse. And that's my opinion, knowing what I know about law enforcement, knowing what I know about domestic violence and about situations like these. Yeah, maybe it's a total surprise to them that he's a serial killer, again, an accused serial killer. But I don't believe he was a very nice guy. I'll put it that way. Melanie?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speculate, but if I was to guess, I would say that he was very controlling and that he had them under some sort of, financial control for sure. I mean, he was probably in charge of all the money. He was probably, emotionally abusive. He seems like a narcissist. He, she looks to me to be like somebody who was under, some sort of control, like she's got some sort of syndrome that could have to do with, being not necessarily physically battered, but emotionally battered. And, if this was their normal and this is just how their dad was, they have nothing, and their husband was, they have nothing really to compare it to. So who knows what they knew or didn't know, but I don't think what went on in that house was good for anybody who was living there.
No, and folks, I use the term Stockholm syndrome very loosely. Really what it means is when the captor identifies with the captive people identify with the captor. And it's very loosely used, but you can understand he is the person in control. And they basically, after a while, identify with him and they do whatever he says. Mike?
Yeah, Billy, he's not a warm and fuzzy kind of guy like, Father Knows Best TV show. No, he was probably, like we know about the BTK killer, he had a whole other side that his family, he wouldn't tell them about. Hobbies he may have had, I think with the gambling in this case, if that's accurate about that lady, if that lady remembers the guy, trips to Atlantic City. He's had his guns down the basement, and I'm sure that there was probably a lot of money that could have gone to help the family in the home, and he took it, he kept it. He was in control of everything. He didn't let on about certain aspects of his life. And I think Melanie's right. This is the day-to-day life that you have with this guy. They maybe Elsa knew that he had a fetish for porn, and maybe he'd seen some ladies, but probably would never believe is probably as mean and controlling and nasty as he could ever be, that he probably would actually be killing people and be accused of being a serial killer. I don't think that entered their minds whatsoever. But that poor lady and that poor family, my guess, has probably been battered for many years.
Yeah, I think more emotionally than
Yeah.
actually physically. I just think emotionally they're battered, and they're just again. That's why I use the term Stockholm syndrome. They're just basically prisoners of his in their home. I understand also, and I know I read it somewhere that the town actually wants to buy the house, much like the University of Idaho, probably to just knock the house down. And I don't know if it's specifically if they voted on it or what, or if they would even accept it. But you would imagine it would be an eyesore in the neighborhood for many, many years, and people are going to be coming around and pointing, that's the house of, Rex Heuermann's house, the Gilgo Beach, and you could understand how it could throw a community into upheaval with people coming around all times, day and night, trying to take a peek at it. Melanie?
Sure, and it's not too far from the Amityville Horror House, which people are still
That's
visiting
true.
to this day, and they had to change the address of that house, 100 times. There's still, looky-loos and grief tourists, as they call them, that love to drive by houses like that. The Massapequa, the police department put up signs on the street where they're ticketing people $200 who were just coming down the street and slowing down to look at the house, and no parking signs. I don't know that they're going to buy the house and tear it. I don't know whose name the house is in. He bought that house, I think, prior to the marriage. It was his mother's house. That house may be in his name. So, would she even be entitled to any of the money? I mean, he had the house prior to the marriage. So that's an interesting question too. He may work a deal where he gives it to her, but where is she going to be able to go? I feel like she doesn't have anywhere to go. She's sitting there. It's 110 degrees in the shade in New York when she was sitting out on the front porch when that reporter went up and banged on her door with her backpack on, like trying to get a statement from her. That was just ridiculously insensitive, I thought. And just leave these people alone. They didn't ask for this, to be banging on their door at all times, day and night, while the police are giving out tickets. Why are they not preventing these reporters from harassing this poor family? Where the son, we've seen the son, he has special needs. I think he's on the spectrum. It was hysterical crying on the porch because of all of these people that were coming and bothering them, and it's sad.
Well,
There
that's
has to be
the
a little more
nature of the
empathy.
press. Yeah, the press has freedom of the press, and the police aren't allowed to tell them that they can't go up and speak to them. You can look at them with disdain for doing that, but you can't order them not to do it. Again, if the press has those freedoms.
Home as well. The photographs of the home, that part of the bathtub appeared to be cut out.
The vinyl bathtub was a vinyl replacement tub that was cut open, as well as the floor ripped up.
And the police did that, I would assume.
Absolutely. Somebody on their behalf did it. Yes.
Does she have some animus or anger toward the police department over how this search warrant was executed at her home?
I don't think it's even gotten to the anger point yet, and it's just processing what's going on in their life. They are still trying to locate their passports, their driver's licenses, and just simple thing, the keys to the house. The police changed the front door locks. We had to get keys to her house from the police department to go back into the house. There's still no key to the back of her house. She can't go out of the back door of her house. We don't have a key to get in and out of that. So it's been a process of just reacquainting herself with her home that she was displaced of for a little over 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks.
She was quoted by the police commissioner in Suffolk County as saying it is what it is. Once they showed her photographs of what they had, this evidence, the bail application. Can you explain to me?
I'm not aware of that quote. That's the police commissioner said that quote. I'm not going to say she said it or didn't say it. It wasn't there. But that just seems like an odd comment to make, and why the police would be showing her evidence and bringing evidence to a crime scene wouldn't make sense to me in the first place. I'm not sure whether that really happened or not.
Have you been with her each time she's spoken with law enforcement?
The only time that she was with law enforcement without us present was that initial day when they went there with the search warrant.
Has she been interviewed extensively by the detectives?
She has not been interviewed at all by the detectives.
Oh. That's interesting. I would have thought they would have asked to interview her. Hey, do you remember anything about this or that?
No.
Is there anything that you would like to say or that she would like to convey to the public
You know, Melanie, I don't know if I buy that, to tell you the truth, that she was never interviewed by the detectives, or they didn't at least attempt to interview her. And at some point she said, I'd rather not speak to you.
She has spousal
know,
privilege. They can't.
right,
All he's got to do is invoke that, and she can't speak to anybody.
Right. No, I'm
right,
just
Mike?
saying.
I
but
mean, so
they
that's kind of
would've-
like the fact that she thought that was odd that they didn't interview her. No, she's the wife. She can't be forced to testify against him.
Right. No, I understand that. But I would
So-
also find it hard to believe that the police didn't just even attempt to ask her a few questions before she pulled the trigger and said, no, I'm not interested in speaking with you. I have an attorney. And
Yeah,
I don't want to talk to you.
I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
I think the if she claimed in any way, shape, or form that she had been abused by this guy, and she's like, "Let me tell you my story," that would probably trump privilege. But I'm not sure if privilege goes beyond testimony during a trial and goes to an investigatory stage, like speaking to detectives. But if she claimed crime victimization, like harassment, like, remember Billy, hat arm, harassment, assault, disorderly conduct, reckless endangerment, all the stuff that we learned in the academy.
And menacing, you forgot
menacing.
that
Thank you. Thank you. I forgot about that one. Yeah. If she claimed that sort of thing, she could have free reign to talk about all kinds of things with him. But so I don't believe it either. Maybe she felt uncomfortable and didn't want to speak to them. But I think they must have tried. I mean, that seems like Detective 101, Operations 101.
She lawyered up right away too. So, he was her lawyer. I mean, she filed divorce within days. So she may have been represented by counsel. It could have been him who said, don't talk to anybody.
Could be.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me play a little bit more of this Law and Crime.
Through you. I mean, obviously we would love to speak with her, but is there anything that you believe she would like to convey to the public?
She would like life to get back to whatever normalcy she can for her and her two children, and have the neighborhood return to a sense of normalcy. The neighbors' upheaval in their lives has been almost as traumatic as Asa's and the children's. To the extent they can't walk their dogs, go to the grocery store, drive down their own street, which was blocked off for a couple of weeks. And it's become a focal point for, serial killer fans that want to drive by the house, and it's just become almost like a tourist attraction. And she wants it to quiet down for her own sanity and for the neighbors as well. There's a lot of elderly people live in the neighborhood that they don't need this.
Rex Heuermann's defense attorney, Michael Brown, said during a press conference that your client has spoken to her husband, and his children have too, since he's been incarcerated. Is she keeping in touch with him? Is he contacting her from jail and they're talking?
I know they've spoken. I'm not sure how many times they've spoken. And I'm not even sure what the content of those conversations were. I know we've instructed her not to discuss any of the facts that are being reported about the case. Everything is recorded out of the jails, and it's often used in criminal prosecutions, any of those recordings. So we've instructed her, and I'm sure Mr. Brown has instructed his client not to discuss the facts of any of the criminal allegations that are out there on the telephone.
Does she still love?
I missed that one. Does she still love him? I don't think we really need to hear that. But just guys, so you realize that when you're in jail, you're in prison, all your phone calls are recorded. So it's not like you can speak freely. You have to be very, very careful what you speak about. So the attorney said he warned his client, Rex Heuermann, and the other attorney said he warned her not to speak about anything about the case. Some of the folks in the chat are asking, why did the police cut open the bathtub? Why did they go through, do all the damage that they did? And you got to realize they're searching for forensic evidence. And in the case of the tub, they could have been searching in the drains for things in the drains that they could potentially. So I hope that answered your question. But they're also looking for, skin cells, hair, potentially body parts, all those things that they would have to break into the tub or break behind walls and destroy things. When you search for evidence against a serial killer, you're not going to be very gentle. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, we talked about this. The scope search pursuant to the search warrant depends upon the objects that you're looking for. Auto parts, rifles, you can put those in certain places. DNA evidence, hair in a drain, stains on a floor, stains. But carpeting, in carpeting, things like that. Trophies he may have, you could secrete that stuff anywhere. Now, remember, that's not a modern, brand new house that was built, 6 months ago. That's an old house, and he lived there his whole life. He might know above what joists to put things under the basement. He might have built a wall. We know he did build some sort of like cinder block, enclosed place to put his guns. Stuff could be in there. There's a million, but just think of your own home. There's a million places where you could put something the size of your cell phone, like that. So they had to do it, unfortunately, and it does look bad. And our hearts do go out to the family because they don't seem to be involved whatsoever. But they had to do it. They've got no choice. To do less would not be doing their job, and it would be dishonoring the victims, because you got to do everything you possibly can to bring the suspected, killer to justice.
Absolutely. What's the old adage, Melanie? You can't look for an elephant in a jewelry box.
Oh, I don't know that.
Never heard
Yeah.
that one? No, in essence, you can't look for something that's huge in a little box like this,
Right,
because
right.
obviously it can't fit in there. So
Sure.
that would be, what do they call, subterfuge? You guys love that word, right?
Yeah, subterfuge is a good word.
Isn't that a legal word too? Let me go to a quick commercial, guys. We'll come right back. Folks, if you're looking for a great attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer and a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe at 718-514-3855 or email him at joe@jmurray-law.com or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Joe is a tremendous supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast. We really appreciate him. So we started this show out talking about how this investigation is by no means over, and proven that they found the recent or they identified Karen Vergara, someone who went missing in 1996. Is there any potentiality that they'll find more potential victims? Is that a potential? Or is someone that's missing going to be found and connected to Rex Heuermann? All of those are distinct possibilities, and that's why this investigation is totally not close to being over. Melanie?
Yeah, well, we still have to see what they found in the house. I mean, they took tons and tons and stuff out of that house, and for it to be all indexed and tested and, run through forensics, I mean, it's going to take a long time to figure out what they found in that house, but they took a lot of stuff out of there, including all the tile on the bathroom floor. If he was responsible for these dismemberings, he dismembered them somewhere. Perhaps it was in the bathroom. Perhaps there was blood. We just don't know. And until we see what they found in that house, it would be crazy to guess. But I'm gonna make an educated guess that they are going to connect him to a lot of other things, people.
Melanie, I happen to agree with you, and I don't have any evidence of it. But I think that's why detectives detect, and that's why detectives investigate, and that's why detectives dig all around and ask questions. And use all kinds of investigative techniques to get information. And I believe you're right. They're going to find more, because now we got him back to 32 years old if he's responsible for Karen Vergara. And again, we don't know. They haven't connected him to that, but that happened in 1997, I believe it was, where she went missing.
96.
96. So that brings him back to 32 years old. So that even seems old for someone that has a proclivity to be a serial killer to start. That we, in our opinions, potentially he started much earlier than that. Mike?
Yeah, Bill, I think his addiction, porn, and prostitutes probably dates way back into the 80s. And so therefore he may have indulged his fantasies without killing, and then maybe later on decided to kill. However, he's got a lot of issues, a lot of challenges ahead. Not only is it these three cases right now, we're looking at a fourth one. And also there may be a federal case if he has possession of child pornography on any sort of device like a laptop, cell phone, that sort of thing. This isn't the beginning of the end of the case and the task force. This is only the end of the beginning. I can't see this task force being disbanded, slowing down, for this foreseeable future, because there's so much at stake, and they have to try to see if any bodies, unidentified bodies, any missing persons cases on Long Island are connected to him. That's their duty. It's going to take a long time. I think people just need to be very patient and just see where it goes, because this task force is going full steam ahead.
Absolutely. Melanie and Mike, I'm going to segue to a whole different topic. And we're not going to spend that long. Maybe we spend about 10 minutes on this. But we just got word that Brian Kohberger, his alibi, well, we didn't just get word, but it's been pretty much, I think they've written a legal brief on it. They intend to go with the alibi that he likes to drive around in the middle of the night. And that's going to be his alibi, that he likes to drive his car just, between 2 and 5 in the morning for no apparent reason other than just that's when he likes to drive his car around. How solid or how ridiculous. I don't want to prejudice myself because I'm obviously.
He's trying to steer our answers here.
I already
That's
did.
leading the witness. Objection.
I don't want to lead the witness, but how viable is that as an alibi, Melanie?
All they got to do is get one juror who says reasonable doubt, one juror to believe that he drove around all night, and that's why his cell phone was pinging there, and that's why his car may have been spotted on video there, and that's all he was doing was driving around. That's all they got to do. I mean, it seems like with all of that forensic evidence, they really didn't have any other choice but to say exactly that. The thing is, they didn't list any witnesses that can attest to the fact that he was driving around. He didn't stop anywhere. He didn't have any receipts. So all it needs is one juror to find reasonable doubt. And I think their entire case is going to be based on cross-examination of the witnesses that the state calls. So we'll see what they come up with. But, a lot of people do drive around to clear their head. I just saw Scott say that in the chat. And, some people do. So maybe if one juror believes that that's not a crazy thing, that maybe that's what really happened. Because, again, we didn't have a preliminary hearing in this case. So we don't know what other evidence they have other than, the cell phone data, the pings on the video, which isn't very clear, the touch DNA on the knife sheath. One juror could say, I believe that he was just driving around and somehow that sheath got there another way. And that's just what I think. I'm hoping they have a lot more to connect him. I'm hoping that we see a lot more. And I think they do. I just think we haven't seen it yet.
All right, Mike, I'm not going to steer you.
Okay,
I'm not going to steer you as a witness. What do you think of the this alibi that they're raising in this case?
Billy, yeah, according to Idaho law, it's really not an alibi, because an alibi it presumes you have a person, a living, breathing person. And the district attorney kept saying, what's the name? What's the address? Like, what's the phone number? We need to talk to your alibi witness before the trial begins, or our side is going to be prejudiced. So, yeah, Melanie's right. What they're going to do is they're going to try Ann Taylor on cross-examination is going to start to ask questions to try to make a little bit of wedge, a little bit of wiggle room, and say, yeah, maybe you have Brian Kohberger's car driving by on 12 occasions over the course of the semester. But, he was out buying drugs, or he was out just taking a drive, clearing his head, and therefore, he doesn't have any sort of criminal mens rea. He's just driving around. However, if that is what she's going to do, and Melanie's right, that's probably definitely what she's going to do. It would, I then think, necessitate him then getting on the stand and offering to the jury, here is my story. Yeah, I'm an insomniac. It's a lot of pressure your first semester in graduate school, inundated with work. I'm drinking coffee. I'm studying late at night. Melanie, you remember law school. You're just down in the coffee, and I need to clear my head. I'm just here, and I'm doing this stuff. And I think that would then make him susceptible to a cross-examination by the prosecutor. So there's some there's some advantages to this non-alibi, but there's some disadvantages because I think it would kind of necessitate him taking the stand. It might not. She might just look for that wiggle room. And as Melanie says, with her cross-examination of a couple of witnesses providing technical data on the cell phone and then the pinging or non-pinging, she might try to look for reasonable doubt right then and there. But again, like Melanie said, yeah, I believe there's probably other DNA evidence that puts him at the scene besides the touch DNA, and that would negate that suggestion that that night he wasn't there. And I'm hoping that whatever tapes they've got from Washington State University they can verify whether or not he actually left the campus on any dates between October, say, and like a month before to the day of the homicide. We'll see.
Absolutely. Joe Laverick, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Surely BK's phone history will show his driving around at night. If it is true, if it's not true, it will show not. Well, the one thing is that we know is on the early morning of November 13th, he turned his phone off. Mm-hmm. Does he do that all the time or just on November 13th when 4 people happened to be murdered with the DNA of his left on a knife sheath in the bed of one of them? Is that the only time he turns his phone off? That could be a question too. But again, I don't want to prejudice my 2 witnesses here because...
Well, yeah. I mean, here's an argument, and I'm not a defense attorney, but I'm going to think like one for now. You can't use that cell phone data, right, as a shield and a sword, right? So he could come up with his own cell phone data to say, look, this was the neighborhood I drove around in every night, and here's my cell phone records to prove it before the murders and after the murders. And this is just what I did every night and show a pattern. But I don't think he'll ever get up on the stand. I think he'll use other witnesses to back up his story. Like, oh, yeah, his roommate. Oh, yeah, he used to go driving around in the middle of the night all the time and he could never sleep. He drank so much coffee, like you're saying. But I don't think he can ever take the stand because that's going to open up the door to a lot of things. You know, isn't it true, Mr. Kohberger, that you were a heroin addict? And isn't it true, Mr. Kohberger, that addicts lie? Okay, so are you lying now or were you lying then? How can we believe anything you say? So it opens the door for too much. He can never take the stand, in my opinion.
Melanie, I happen to agree with you. Because look what happened to Alec Murdoch, and he was a lot slicker than Brian Kohberger. I mean, Alec Murdoch was a professional liar. You know, doesn't lawyer and liar?
Liar. Lawyer.
You're rough, Billy. You're rough.
I'm rough tonight. I didn't mean to. You guys, I'm trying to cross-examine you guys, but I'm not trying to lead the witnesses. You know. Look, we're not going to. I just find, if that is even an alibi, not the strongest alibi you could use, and I guess that the defense in that case had to answer. It's almost like answering ready. They had to answer to something relative to an alibi, and so this is what they came up with.
Well, that's really all they could come up with when confronted with all of the evidence that the prosecution already has. Right?
No, absolutely.
So, I mean, we don't know if it's true or not, but they have all of this evidence and the defense knows what they're going to show. So he's got to explain it. And if he's got to respond to this notice of alibi within a certain period of time or lose his right to the alibi, he's got to come up with it now.
Melanie, someone in the chat asked, does the judge have to allow his non-alibi?
He doesn't even have to put up a defense. It's the prosecution's job to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, every element of it. So he really doesn't need to put up a defense. But once you're served with that notice of alibi, you do have to respond to it within a certain period of time or else you waive it. So they had to submit something. And that's what it is. And it's really a non-alibi. You're right, because there's no witnesses.
Absolutely. You know, folks, I just want to thank everyone that came by tonight, all you folks that are new Melanie Little fans. I see a lot of new Melanie Little fans in the chat, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff. I got to keep, as Melanie gets bigger and bigger in this YouTube world, I got to have her on more and more as a guest. And I may even have Mike put makeup on and look.
Yeah.
Just
that's
just
not
kidding.
going to be good.
We need some comedic relief in this show too. It's very, very, very serious. Sometimes when we do these two cases that are so, have caught not just the imagination of over the world, especially this Gilgo case is just really going off the charts all over the world. People are interested, as well as the Idaho case of the 4 students that were murdered by accused murder of Brian Kohberger. And we always like to mention the names, not just call them the Idaho 4, Ethan Chapin, Zainer Knodel, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves. And, we hate to, as I said, we hate to just refer to them that in the same way that we don't like to refer to the Gilgo 4 as the Gilgo 4. I'd like to mention their names also. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. These are real people, real human beings that lost their lives. They have real families. They have people that love them, and we don't just like to talk to them or about them as if they're a statistic. I want to thank you guys too, Melanie and Mike, for coming on the show tonight. I think we covered a lot of stuff, and I think that none of this stuff is easy, and even people that purport to be expert, even the Suffolk County DA, he's made numerous mistakes in his presentation in talking about very technical things. And so if the district attorney is making mistakes, where does it leave us? And knowing some of these things that are changing all the time, especially the laws, i.e. DNA, and what's allowed, what's not allowed. I thought it was very interesting, Mike, when you answered the question about do they need, and Melanie, you answered it also, a search warrant because they have an exemplar of his DNA. But you answered it very well. No, they need a new sample, and for very specific reasons. I'm going to go to each one of you guys. Your final thoughts. You can answer whatever you want, and then we'll say goodnight to everybody. Melanie, you first. Your final thoughts.
Mike had a couple of $10 words tonight. One was mens rea, and the other one I can't remember. I should have written it down, but it was really good in the beginning. I forget what it was. Justice for Karen Vergara. She was a lovely 34-year-old woman who sadly went missing, and it took 27 years for her to be identified. So my thoughts and prayers go out to her family, her biological children, and all of the victims and the families in this case. And let's hope that we find some more information soon and we get another indictment on Maureen Brainerd Barnes, and we can put some closure or start to put some closure to this horrific case.
Absolutely. Professor Mike, and I don't mean, I'll take that back about the makeup.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Thank you, William. No, look, justice has been delayed for these poor ladies for decades, over a decade. So let's hope that justice will ultimately not be denied, and that Rex Sherman will get all of the rights and privileges that he's entitled to under the Constitution, and that any decision made by any jury in this case will be a just decision, and that we could all live with.
Very well said, Mike. And all you folks listening tonight, I want to thank you all for coming by on a Sunday night at 9 o'clock. I know some of you guys have to get up early tomorrow, but it was worth it, right? We had a good show tonight. Thanks for coming by and listening. On behalf of myself, Bill Cannon, attorney Melanie Little, and Professor Michael Geary, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night, and God bless.
And everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.